What's happening everyone, my name is Alex and welcome back. So Poco's back with another brand new phone. The one that we have today, it's called the POCO X4 Pro 5G. This is a phone that's powered by the Snapdragon 695 that's paired with either 6 or 8 gigs of RAM. You can also get this with 128 gigs of internal storage or 256 gigs of internal storage. The version that I have has 6 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of internal storage, and this particular device gets an Antutu benchmark score of about 385,000, so we are not looking at a slow device by any means. Now, I've also done a camera comparison between this phone, so the POCO X4 Pro 5G, and my iPhone 13. And if you're here and you just want to see that comparison, that starts at this minute of this video, so you can skip right to that comparison. Alright, starting with a super quick unboxing. Of course, in the box you're gonna find a case for the device. We also have the charging cable and we have a 67 watt fast charger. So even though we have a 5000 milliamp hour battery inside this phone, charging this from 0 to 100 is done in about an hour. So insanely quick for a phone like this. Not to mention that on one charge you can typically get between 12 and 15 hours of screen on time. Of course, it depends on how you use the phone, but you could get up to 15 hours of screen on time on one charge. On the front of the device, we have a 6.67 inches AMOLED screen that has a 1080p resolution and a refresh rate of 120 Hz. Of course, you can lower that refresh rate, and if you do lower the refresh rate, you can get better battery life. But it really depends what you're doing, because if you're playing games, maybe it makes sense to keep that refresh rate at 120 Hz. The peak brightness for this screen is also 1200 nits, so no issues seeing this screen in direct sunlight. So for a budget-friendly phone, this is one of the best screens that you're gonna be able to find. This time around we get a bit of a different design. Now the phone looks a lot like my iPhone. It looks like my iPhone 13, but a bit bigger, I'm gonna say. So the frame around the phone is made out of plastic. There is nothing on the left hand side. At the top here we have a 3.5mm audio jack, so you could plug in some headphones. We have the holes for the second speaker, so you have one speaker at the top and one speaker at the bottom. The speakers do get quite loud. We have the hole for a microphone and an IR blaster, so you could use this phone as a remote control for your TV, just to give you an example. Moving to the right hand side of the device, there we have the volume buttons and the power button. As we've seen in the past, this is also a fingerprint scanner, and as a fingerprint scanner it works really good. It takes half a second from the time you touch it for the screen to unlock. At the bottom here we have the SIM card slot, so this device can take either two SIM cards or a SIM card and an SD card, so you're not going to be able to use two SIM cards and an SD card at the same time. We have the USB-C charging port, the hole for a microphone, and that second speaker that I mentioned earlier. Moving to the back of the device, well, this one looks a bit different. I'm gonna say the phone looks a bit unique, not to mention that it depends how the light hits the back. The phone does look different every single time. We also have the brand name on the top right corner. They're quite big, I'm gonna say, next to the camera. So the main camera is an 108 megapixel sensor. We also have an ultra wide camera and a macro camera, but I'm gonna show you pictures in just a bit. Next, we're going to be talking about performance. So the phone runs MIUI 13 that's based on Android 11. I'm not sure when it will be updated to be based on Android 12, but probably in the very near future. As we've seen with many Xiaomi devices in the past, the phone is super speedy. So no matter what you do on it, you're not going to feel that the phone slows down. So opening apps, closing apps, keeping a bunch of apps running in the background, even though that will depend on how much RAM you have. As I mentioned earlier, I have the version with 6 gigs of RAM. But most applications that I've tried on this device so far work flawlessly without any issues. So even gaming, you can play games without any problems. So overall, really good performance for a budget-friendly device. The phone also gets an NFC chip inside it, and that means that you're going to be able to make payments with the phone. The GPS unit inside it only takes like a second to find your location. Well, of course, it depends if you're indoors or outdoors. For outdoors, it only takes about a second. And we also have a variety of sensors available. So pretty decent device for a budget-friendly device. And next we're gonna move on and start checking out some pictures that I took with this device and my iPhone 13. And we're gonna start with the pictures that I took with the ultra-wide cameras, I guess. Alright, so looking at the ultra-wide pictures that I took, well, the first thing you're gonna notice here is the fact that the pictures taken by the iPhone 13 are a bit wider. So the field of view is wider, therefore you can see a bit more in those pictures taken by the iPhone 13. For colors, I kind of prefer the colors from the POCO X4 Pro 5G. They do seem to be a bit closer to reality, but for dynamic range and picture sharpness, it seems that the iPhone 13 does better. Mostly if you look on the right and on the left hand side of those pictures, you're gonna notice that the pictures taken by the POCO don't look that sharp. So overall, for the ultra-wide camera, of course, the iPhone 13 does better. Moving on to some 5x zoom pictures, and here keep in mind that neither device has a telephoto lens, so what you're seeing is digital zoom. And even though I thought the POCO X4 Pro 5G would do better because we have that main camera that's 108 megapixel sensor, well, it seems that most pictures taken by the iPhone 13 are sharper. So for 5x zoom, the iPhone does better than the POCO X4 Pro 5G. And we are moving on to pictures I took with the main cameras on the back of the two devices. And for the main cameras, and of course taking all the pictures on auto mode, a lot of the pictures taken by the POCO X4 Pro 5G are about the same or better than the iPhone 13. In some situations, the iPhone 13 makes those pictures look a bit too blue, so it kind of takes the blue from the sky and makes the whole picture looking blue. So in a lot of those pictures, the POCO X4 Pro 5G does better than the iPhone 13, even though it is a much cheaper device. So for the main cameras, I don't think that you can go wrong with either device. So I'm gonna let you guys watch a few more pictures and I'll be right back just before we talk about the nighttime pictures. Okay, next we're gonna move on and check out some pictures that I took at night. So on the POCO X4 Pro 5G, you can only use the night mode if you are using the main camera on the back. So if you wanna take pictures with the ultra wide camera, you cannot use the night mode. So I'm only gonna show you pictures that I took with the main cameras and of course using the night mode on both devices. Well, here the iPhone does do better. It seems that in the situations where it's super dark, the iPhone does better for those pictures. But if you do have some light around yourself, whenever you take the pictures, the POCO X4 Pro 5G doesn't do bad. But of course, overall, the iPhone 13 does better. But we have to remember how much more expensive the iPhone is compared to the POCO X4 Pro 5G. But as I said, if you do have some light around you, you can still take decent looking pictures with the POCO X4 Pro 5G. Alright, so next we're gonna move on and check out some sample recordings that I've done with these two devices. So the maximum recording resolution on the POCO X4 Pro 5G is 1080p at 30 frames per second. Under settings there is no setting for image stabilization. Even though those videos do seem to have some type of image stabilization, I mean, they're not totally steady, but there seems to be some kind of image stabilization. Overall, of course, the iPhone does better, even though the internal microphone on the POCO X4 Pro 5G does seem to pick up the sound a bit better than the iPhone 13, mostly when it's quiet around yourself. So let me show you those sample recordings and I will be right back. Alright, we have a quick video test between the POCO X4 Pro 5G and of course the iPhone 13. For this recording I'm using the main cameras on the back of the two devices. Now the maximum recording resolution for the POCO X4 Pro 5G with the main camera on the back is 1080p at 30 frames per second. Of course, with the iPhone 13 we could actually do 4K at 60 frames per second. Even though we don't have any settings for image stabilization on the POCO X4 Pro 5G, it does seem that it has some type of image stabilization enabled for video recordings. Just gonna pan left slowly and back right. So yeah, I guess I'm gonna walk this way for a bit just so you can see how that image stabilization does on both devices. Looking on the screens here, it does look a bit more steady on the iPhone 13, but we'll have to see how this footage actually looks on the computer. So yeah, 1080p at 30 frames per second on the POCO X4 Pro 5G and 4K at 30 frames per second on the iPhone 13. moving on to a recording with the front-facing cameras, once again the iPhone 13 and the POCO X4 Pro 5G. The maximum recording resolution for the front-facing camera on the POCO X4 Pro 5G is 1080p at 30 frames per second, where of course the maximum recording resolution for the iPhone 13 is 4K at 60 frames per second. It is a super sunny day out today, but a bit windy, so you may hear some wind aside from my voice. So yeah, this is how recording done with the front-facing cameras on these two devices would look like. We have a quick video test between the POCO X4 Pro 5G and of course the iPhone 13. For this recording I'm using the main cameras on the back of the two devices. With the iPhone 13 I'm recording in 4K at 30 frames per second, where with the POCO I'm recording in 1080p at 30 frames per second. So we're gonna walk this way, nice and slow. It's not totally dark out here, but most people aren't gonna film in total darkness, I'm assuming. This way we can't really see anything with either device, so we're gonna walk this way. So yeah, this is how recording in low light between the iPhone 13 and the POCO X4 Pro 5G would look like. So what do you guys think about those sample recordings? Personally, I'm okay with 1080p at 30 frames per second recordings. I don't really need more than that for a phone like this, but I was expecting to see better image stabilization. I feel that the previous POCO model that we had better image stabilization. So I was definitely expecting better image stabilization than what we got. Moving on to some selfies, well, here dynamic range in those pictures taken by the iPhone 13 of course is better, therefore most selfies taken by the iPhone 13 will be better. For nighttime selfies, I feel that neither device does that great, but again, that was kind of to be expected. Now, this camera comparison, of course, you know that the iPhone 13 is about, I don't know, 5 times, maybe 4 times more expensive than this. So yes, this was not a fair comparison, but I wanted to show you what a budget-friendly device like the POCO X4 Pro 5G can do when compared to a flagship. So that was the main purpose of that camera comparison. Alright guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.